4.0 is live effectively, and let me tell you, there are some very juicy performance things to talk about. Vulkan seems to have taken a step forward. CIG has made massive improvements to the stations compared to the PTU. The jump tunnel performance is very interesting, and the first live version of server meshing seems to be holding up pretty well. Ultimately, CIG has done a pretty incredible job over the last few months to get this out, but my minimum spec PC is really chugging in some locations. So let me take you on a performance journey through 4.0. Let's start this journey, as we always do on this channel, in Lawville. You'll see here, versus 324.3, 4.0 the preview is performing pretty well. This is at 1080p. When you put in the 1440p and 4K results, again, as you'd expect, this is kind of what you see. 4K, the 4080 takes a bit of a hit. But let's get on to the more exciting stuff. Let's look at Vulkan. Now, Vulkan seems to be close to DX11. Now, this is not something we've seen at any point. Literally the last video I made, I was testing loads of Vulkan stuff. Performance was way down in Vulkan compared to DX11. But as you'll see throughout this video, things are looking positive. And it does seem as though CIG have done some significant work to get Vulkan heading in the right direction at least. The minimum spec PC though is struggling, even with Vulkan. So Vulkan performs about the same as DX11, which is good, but we are still really in very, very chuggy sort of territory. The entity count, even in the 4.0 preview build of Lawville, is still very high, and so 25 is not ideal. But let's just move on to ArcCorp just to show you again that Vulkan here performing pretty close to DX11. So again, a really good sign. And because of the bonuses of Vulkan that we've seen throughout the testing on this channel, that the frame pacing is just much better, it's probably worth having a significant play around with Vulkan if that's your sort of thing. Try it out and see if it's actually going to be a better option for you than DX7, because we are heading in that direction. And obviously, CIG in the past have said that at some stage they will want to turn off DX11 completely. So we seem to be getting closer maybe to that time. Now, let's get out of the cities of Stanton and head towards Pyro on this journey. If you've watched some of the videos that I've done over the last few months, we've seen that performance in the jump tunnel was pretty iffy. It was pretty spiky. There was some unpleasantness, stutteriness, but has CIG managed to eliminate some of that when we're going to live? Well, yes, they have. You'll see here at 1080p and 4K on my main system, performance is looking very good. And this is actually all GPU bound. We're not CPU limited here at all. When we go to the minimum spec system though, we're just about getting through here. 30 FPS with dips below, and I'm going to show you the frame time graphs in a second for this. It's not obviously anywhere near as pleasant as those, but it is just about playable on my minimum spec build with the 10400 and 1660. The interesting thing to note here from these frame time graphs, we've got the 4K and the 1080p one, is that it's pretty smooth all the way through until we get to the end, and you get this spike on both of these. There is just a stutter as you come out of the jump tunnel, and all of the kind of general unevenness of performance seems to be smoothed out for the rest of the tunnel, but that last bit is pretty noticeable. But again, this is a first go at this on the live servers, and overall they've done a pretty good job to get in as good a state as they have. And again, you can see that on the minimum spec PC, you get that stutter at the end as you come out. But again, if you notice, the frame time there is hovering around the 30 FPS mark, so there's points where you are in the mid-20s and it's not that easy to steer around all the craziness in the tunnel. So just about holding in there the minimum spec system. Now, as we arrive in Pyro, let's for a moment talk about server meshing. If you think back to some of the early meshing tests this year when things look pretty ropey, we just have to say well done, CIG. Everything works pretty well. It's not perfect, but a lot of people were worried about another 318 disaster, and it's just nowhere near that. This whole year, I've been predicting that CIG would play it safe and just get a very basic version of meshing in with 4.0. Maybe a couple of servers slapped together, 200 players across the shard, but no, that's just not what they've done. They've gone big. They've gone with 10 servers on a shard, 500 to 600 players. And I have to say, seeing so many more players around, there's real life, that phrase that CIG often use, making a living, breathing universe, it does feel a bit more like that. It definitely helps the feeling that this is a game rather than just this big empty space that you're running around. And what I've noticed so far is that the numbers in Stanton, in the servers in Stanton, have just been much higher than the Pyro ones. And I guess maybe that's a result of this community fear that we've had around about PvP and Pyro, and PvP is actually something I only experienced at one location on Bloom where I just flew away from it, so it wasn't a big deal. But I've flown around with no worries at all so far. But how about the server FPS? Because this is the first version of meshing. Has it fixed everything? Well, no, it hasn't. I have been on plenty of servers that had low player counts and they were actually locked at 30 FPS, which was very nice. Everything's very responsive. NPCs will get you if you're not completely on your game. But I've also been on many servers within these shards that have been on the 20s, and I've seen some as low as kind of 12 to 15 FPS, which obviously is nowhere near what we were after. We were after a locked 30 everything. But compared to 324.3 and all the previous patches we've had without server meshing, as a kind of low, that's pretty good. It's definitely a good step in the right direction, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what CIG does in 2025. Will we see even bigger player counts? Will they start talking about dynamic meshing, where servers resize and adapt to what players are doing? Considering this is effectively the tier 0 version of server meshing, it's pretty impressive, and I'm really looking forward to how it will progress. Next, we're going to journey to some clouds on Bloom. Now, I've had a lot of people say to me, the clouds are amazing. They are clearly amazing. I've had some people say to me, performance seems to be better. And when I put it on photo mode, things are good. Let's take a look at the clouds. First of all, here is what it looks like with no clouds. Obviously, that's very disappointing and sad. Nobody wants to live life like this. So medium clouds, a bit more kind of noise going on. High, slightly better. I rarely can tell the difference between medium and high. When you get to very high, things, I think, significantly improve. And then when you go to photo mode, it looks unbelievable. But the performance, as we'll see in a second, is pretty tricky. When you put them side by side again, it's not maybe a great example of the medium versus high here with the clouds, the formation as it is. But I don't see masses of difference between those two. But very high, I think, looks very good. And again, photo mode, incredible. But performance, you can see that photo mode, this is on 4080 at 4K. We've done it at 4K just to push things as hard as you can. It's not ideal, 20 FPS. And heading up there, again, the difference between medium and high is very small in terms of performance, but very high, it was also quite demanding. But when you pop on some upscaling, DLSS in this case, which is probably the recommended thing with the clouds and just generally playing this game, things look a lot better. You can run this game fairly well at 4K with the clouds on medium, obviously, and that's actually still GPU bound. Probably, of all the choices here, what I'd probably go for would be actually very high clouds with DLSS on. And the difference between 80 and 100 isn't that noticeable, but the actual difference in the quality of the clouds is fairly noticeable. So I think if you can, with your GPU, get very high clouds on in some way with some upscaling, that's probably the ideal, but I didn't even bother testing this with the minimum spec system. You're going to be wanting to keep things as low as possible, probably medium, because they are very heavy on GPUs. And it's interesting, this is as we kind of come into the new GPUs that are going to be launching in the next month or so from NVIDIA, the high-end ones, there's not many reasons for faster cards than what we have now. The 4080 and 4090 are very fast. 7900 XTX is also very fast. But the clouds at higher settings in Star Citizen are one of the only things that actually a faster card might be helpful for. So that will be some interesting testing when I pick up the 5080. Another part of the game that in the PTU cycle for 4.0 has been really a bit of a mess was the stations. The performance in the stations was not great. This is with a 7800 HUD, this footage you're seeing. We're sub 30 at points, and again, things have consistently been improving. There's been lots of patch notes about improvements that CIG have been doing, optimizations and stuff, and has it paid off? Well, yes, it has. You can see here in Obituary, this run that you'll see in the background that I'm doing through the station, we're doing pretty well here. This is fine. Obviously, this is now a faster CPU than 9800 HUD compared to the 7800 HUD in that footage, but we're doing plenty of frames here, and yeah, in some ways they've just done a great job of optimizing. And obviously we talk about logging, how they're running extra code in the PTU to try and gather information and things like that. Once this has actually ended up going live, performance is looking much better, so well done to CIG. Again, Vulkan is doing pretty well here. That 1% percentile FPS is looking good for Vulkan. On the minimum spec system, well, again, Vulkan's doing well, but overall performance is not looking particularly great here. And we're sort of around that 30 FPS mark that I say is kind of the bare minimum, but it's It's not a pleasant experience to run around the stations on this minimum spec PC. Next, let's head to Ruin Station to the Ghost Arena to show you some FPS contested zone stuff. You'll see with the footage that I'm running here, this is with the main system. So again, very fast CPU, as fast as you can get effectively. We are around-ish the 60 FPS mark, and this is decent compared again to what it had been at certain points when we had tried this out in the PTU. This was tough. It was chugging on really high-end hardware, and so I'm really glad to see that for such a competitive zone, effectively this is designed for competitive PvP, you can actually play the game around the 60 FPS. You will have a significant advantage, I think, if you're playing on a really high-end system compared to the minimum spec system. I've not recorded the footage, but I did try and get into the Ghost Arena with the minimum spec system. It was around 30 FPS, bit below, bit above, again, what we're seeing in general. You could play, but playing competitively at 30 when somebody else has got 60 FPS, you're at a huge disadvantage. So yes, again, hopefully this sort of area will continue to be optimized and get better. Again, it has improved compared to the PTU, but this probably isn't ideal. And even 60 FPS isn't ideal to be doing kind of fast Twitch-based reaction stuff and shooting. Yeah, you ideally would want a lot more than 60. So it's good and it's playable on a higher system, but I think CIG have still got some work to do on this part of the game. Let me just give you some overall thoughts on 4.0 as well. I've been testing this, not playing it. So I've not been trying to do missions and things like that. And so I've not run into many of the bugs that I've been hearing about. I saw plenty of server errors on the PTU, but I've actually not seen one on the live preview yet. I did have that issue where you'd quantum travel towards the star, but CIG have been hot fixing fairly often, and so they've actually kind of cleaned up quite a few of the issues. I think really we just need to say thank you to the team of people who are still in the office working away at this. And probably thank you is important to say to all of the people who've made this happen this year. We as a community, we often get upset about this drama or that drama. I am sometimes critical of CIG on this channel, but we just have to praise them when they do good things. And we know that all sorts of teams have been working super hard to get this out for months and months. And so from a performance point of view, definitely the meshing side and some of the art and the styling of Pyro and some of the content, the contested zone stuff, they've done a really great job. So we've got to say thank you. And Chris Roberts has talked about meshing as the last big hurdle. And the company has finally actually managed to jump that hurdle. And so I do wonder if we will look back at this moment as one of the really key parts of the whole project. Maybe in a few years' time, we'll look back and say, that was the point where things started to head in a more positive direction. Who knows? Let me know in the comments what you think. And I'd also love to hear about your experience of performance. Have you seen fairly decent performance like I've seen here, an improvement over the PTU? Have you tested out Vulkan? Is it looking good in your case? Let me know how things are going on your system.